Facing adversity with courage and determination, they have each devoted more than 40 years to championing religious freedom and focusing attention on human rights abuses in Iran, and to advocating the reinstatement of a democratic form of government. The award also recognizes the long and close relationship between Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi and Richard Nixon. The Shah's long reign spanned 7 presidential administrations. But it was his special relationship and personal friendship with President Nixon that made history and changed history. They met for the first time in Tehran in December 1953. In notes he made at the time, Vice President Nixon described the Shah's quiet dignity. He was impressed by his probing, astute questions. He sensed an inner strength. They met again in Washington in 1958, and 10 years later in Tehran. In October 1969, the new president welcomed his old friend to the White House. As a result of their discussions, reflecting the Nixon Doctrine and the president's grand strategy, the focus of U.S. Middle East policy shifted to Iran as the cornerstone of regional stability and America's partner in the struggle to counter Soviet expansion. In 1972, the Shah and Shahbanu welcomed the president and First Lady to Iran. It was a truly memorable visit that has been described as the capstone event in the shift of U.S. Persian Gulf policy, emphasizing Iranian primacy. At the White House in 1973, the warmth of the president's welcome reflected their friendship, while the depth of his remarks demonstrated the grand strategy aspects of their partnership.
Your Imperial Majesty, it is a very great honor and a special honor for me to welcome you again to our nation's capital, and at the same time to welcome Her Imperial Majesty, the Empress. Our friendship goes back over a period of 20 years. When we first met in Tehran, when I was Vice President of the United States, and when you then were a very young emperor. It is significant to note that of all of the areas in the world which pose a potential threat to peace in the world, that Iran is in a very key central area. I refer, of course, to the Mideast, to the Persian Gulf, and to all of that area that surrounds it. And what gives us a great deal of heart, those of us all over the world who are interested in peace, is that you have always stood for and stand for now a policy of contributing to the forces of peace and stability rather than to the forces of war and destruction.
In 1979, the former president traveled to Mexico to confer and console with the exiled and ailing Shah, assuring him that millions of Americans were still his friends. The friendship that was strong in triumph was strengthened in tragedy.
I saw the Shah the last time in Mexico, at Cuernavaca, Mexico. He was then in the last phases of terminal cancer, although he would never admit it or talk about his own problems at all. But he was quite thin and quite pale. But his head still as active and sharp as it had always been. He's a very intelligent, introspective man. And he said that what concerned him about the way he was treated by the United States was not that the United States was for him or against him, but was the uncertainty of the policy. He says there's nothing worse when you are confronted with revolutionary and rebel forces and uncertainty insofar as support is concerned. One day, for example, he said statements would come in, public and private, from Washington indicating total support and urging him to stand firm. The next day, there would be some story leaked from a high-level aide, printed all over the world and given particular credence in Tehran, to the effect that lower-level or second-level people in the administration were meeting with Khomeini and others who were out to knock the Shah off or out, as the case might be. And then the next day, there would be a story to the effect that in the event that the Shah left Iran or was overthrown, the United States would be prepared to accept any government that the people chose. Well, he said all of this had the effect of encouraging his enemies and, of course, discouraging his own supporters. He said that was a mistake. And I believe it was a mistake, too. As a matter of fact, what happened to the Shah, I think, could only be interpreted in that part of the world and in other parts of the world as well, is that it is dangerous to be a friend of the United States, and it may pay to be an enemy. I think what we have to understand is that the Shah was the best friend of the United States in that area, in the whole Persian Gulf area, and it was Israel's only friend. The Shah, we must remember, in the 1973 war, furnished oil for our Mediterranean fleet when the other countries in the area had cut it off. And the Shah tied down the Iraqi forces by supporting the Kurds against the Iraqis so that they never got involved in the 73 war.
A year later, he made a sad and lonely pilgrimage to march alongside the Shah Banu and the Crown Prince in the Shah's funeral procession through the streets of Cairo.
When I was there, I was the only dignitary of any rank who came to the Shah's funeral, because here the Shah, who before everybody was bowing and scraping before him, the heads of state and government and so forth, because he was rich and powerful and so forth, and now they all avoided him because he was out of power. And I never forgot that as I was standing there in the big tent where all the VIPs, usually ambassadorial level, not head of state level, were standing, Sadat came walking in, resplendent in his uniform, general's uniform. He saw me, his eyes lit up, and he walked over, held both hands out, and he said, "How good of you to come. How good of you to come." And I said, "Mr. President, it was very courageous of you to receive the Shah after virtually every other country did not grant him sanctuary." And he said, "Courageous, sir? It isn't courageous to stand up for a friend."
For more than 4 decades, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has dedicated his life in exile to preserving and honoring the history and greatness of Iran. He travels the world speaking out against the abuse and oppression of the Iranian people, calling for peaceful regime change and for a new government for Iran. Reza Pahlavi has said that peace is neither a relic of history nor a distant dream. It is a promise we owe to ourselves and our children, and together we can make it a reality. The Richard Nixon Foundation presents the Architect of Peace Award to His Imperial Highness Reza Pahlavi.
So much. Please grab your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nikon Katibi, and it is an extraordinary honor and a profound privilege to stand before you tonight to introduce a man whose vision, courage, and commitment resonate not only in the hearts of Iranians worldwide, but also on the global stage. His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi, Crown Prince of Iran, is more than just the son of the late Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He embodies hope, resilience, and an unwavering advocacy for freedom and democracy. For those of us who grew up in Iranian households like mine, the Crown Prince's presence was a constant. His image adorned our walls, and his voice echoed on our television screens. As a young Iranian Americans, we viewed him as a symbol of a distant Iran, one that we held in our memories. But as I matured and had the privilege of engaging with the Crown Prince personally, it became clear that he's far more than a symbol of Iran's past. He represents the promise of Iran's future, one rooted in freedom, dignity, and democratic values. For decades living in exile, His Royal Highness has courageously taken on the role of one of the most prominent voices against the brutal regime of the Islamic Republic. While many have become entangled in debates over reformists and hardliners, the Crown Prince has seen through this false dichotomy, recognizing that both factions represent the same system of oppression. His unwavering conviction has been clear. Iran deserves not just reform, but a complete transformation. A free, secular democracy aligned with the aspirations of its people and the values shared by the free world. One more time, Iran deserves not just a reform, but a complete transformation. A free, secular democracy aligned with the aspirations of its people and the values shared by the free world. The Crown Prince has spent decades advocating for this vision, often at great personal risk. As a beacon of hope for millions of Iranians, his courage and persistence have inspired the brave women, men, and young people who today take to the streets, risking their lives in the pursuit of liberty. He has been their voice on the international stage, speaking for those who cannot and drawing global attention to their struggles. Beyond Iran, His Royal Highness has also emerged as a leading voice for a new Middle East, one built on cooperation, mutual respect, and peace. Last year, he made history as the most prominent Iranian to visit the State of Israel, where he was warmly received by leaders across the political spectrum. His presence there was not merely symbolic, it demonstrated his commitment to bridging divides and building new alliances for a brighter future, not only for Iran, but for that entire region in the Middle East. In the Arab world, too, the Crown Prince has championed a vision for peace and prosperity, one that rejects the Islamic Republic's legacy of conflict and violence. He has reached out to leaders, communities, and nations that have long been at odds, offering a path forward that unites rather than divides, that builds bridges instead of walls. The Crown Prince's commitment is evident not only in words, but also in actions, ladies and gentlemen. In Jerusalem, he paid his respect at the Jewish holy site of the Western Wall. In Haifa, he recognized the plight of Iran's Baha'i minority by touring the Baha'i gardens. He honored the memory of Iran's persecuted Christians by visiting the Vatican, the Holy See. And most personally, he paid homage to Iran's ancient Zoroastrian faith by visiting the Zoroastrian Fire Temple in Houston. Tonight, we gather to honor a man whose tireless efforts for a free Iran and a peaceful region echo the aspirations of millions. While the Islamic Republic poses one of the greatest threats to global stability, the freedom-loving people of Iran represent some of the world's greatest potential partners. At the helm of their struggles stands a man who embodies their hopes, their dreams, and unwavering resolve. A man whose name they chant in the streets across the country almost daily. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with the utmost respect and admiration I ask you to join me in welcoming to the stage that very man, a true leader, a voice for justice, a symbol of a brighter future. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friend and tonight's distinguished recipient, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi.
Well, after 4 decades, I guess I have to rely on other tools than I didn't need earlier, but it's a lifetime dedication, and I'm happy to be back here at the Nixon Library. Distinguished guests, dear friends, and fellow advocates of freedom and peace. It is an honor to receive the Nixon Library's Architect of Peace Award. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the leadership of the Nixon Library, the Nixon Foundation, and all those who continue to preserve the legacy of a great statesman, President Richard Nixon. This honor is especially meaningful not only because of President Nixon's towering contributions to global peace, but because of the deep personal connection between President Nixon and my family. Tonight, as we reflect on the legacy of peace and diplomacy, we also recognize that standing for what is right sometimes requires standing alone, something President Nixon understood better than most. When we think of President Nixon's legacy, we naturally recall his groundbreaking foreign policy, his bold decision to open relations with China, his efforts to ease tensions with the Soviet Union through détente, and his tireless work to secure peace in the aftermath of Vietnam. But President Nixon's vision extended beyond the immediate concerns of his time. He saw the Middle East as a vital region, one that held the key to stability in an increasingly interconnected world. And it was President Nixon who best understood the vital role Iran played in securing peace and security in that region. Iran, under my late father's leadership, stood as a pillar of stability in the Middle East. My father, the late Shah, worked tirelessly to build a modern, progressive Iran, a nation where economic growth, education, and development could flourish. And throughout those years, President Nixon stood as a trusted ally and a steadfast friend of Iran. He recognized, long before many others, the importance of a strong, peaceful Iran in safeguarding the Middle East. But tonight, I wish to reflect on something much more personal. For me, President Nixon's legacy is not just one of foreign policy, but one of friendship. Friendship and loyalty in the truest sense of those words. Many of you know the difficult history of my family. When my father was forced into exile, the world was quick to turn its back. Those who once relied on his leadership, vision, and even patronage found it easier to abandon him at his moment of need. Yet, amidst this desertion, one man remained. That man was President Nixon. When my father passed away in 1980, President Nixon did not hesitate to travel to Egypt for his funeral. In doing so, he joined President Anwar Sadat as one and the only two world leaders of significant global stature to attend. Despite the shifting political winds, despite the ease with which so many others had turned away, President Nixon chose to stand by his friend, and in doing so, he stood by the people of Iran. It was not a decision based on political expediency. It was a decision rooted in integrity and conviction. President Nixon knew what so many others chose to forget, that true friendship is not about convenience, not performatively, but instinctively. He knew that standing on the right side of history meant doing so even when it is not popular. Today, as I reflect on those difficult years, while I feel immense personal affection and appreciation for Presidents Sadat and Nixon, I feel no bitterness toward those other world leaders who abandoned my father and my nation. Indeed, I do not think much about them at all. For me, the greatest recognition does not come from the actions of world leaders or political figures. It comes from the people of Iran themselves. Today, in the streets of Iran, people chant the name of my father. They remember him not simply as a leader of a bygone era, but as a symbol of sovereignty, progress, pride, and service to the nation. Despite the decades that have passed, his memory is alive in the hearts of Iranians. His greatest vindication comes not from the actions of governments, but from the voices of ordinary people who honor his legacy. I spoke of President Nixon standing alone. Often those fighting for Iran's liberation did so alone, and against the pressures of the global media and establishment. Even today, those pressures continue. But today things have changed, because those ordinary people who honor my father's name do so not just out of nostalgia. Those ordinary people, millions of them across my country, are extraordinarily brave, because they are not just hoping for the better future my father believed they deserved. They are fighting for it. I was often told that I would not get far in my campaign for my country because I did not have the apparatus of state, certainly not the proper funding, and no army. But now, I have such an army, my extraordinarily brave compatriots. And having once worn my nation's uniform, there's no one I stand more proudly side by side with than the people of Iran today. And I will stand with them until victory. And so, as I accept this award tonight, I do so not just for myself. This honor belongs to the people of Iran. They are the true architects of peace. For decades, they have endured unimaginable suffering under a brutal regime that has sought to extinguish their hopes and dreams. Yet, despite everything, they continue to rise. They continue to fight for the realization of our great civilization. Their sacrifices are not too often ignored on the world stage. But tonight, through this recognition, the Nixon Library is shining a light on their courage and resilience. Just as President Nixon once stood with my father, the Nixon Library now stands with the Iranian people, choosing not to follow the easy or popular path, but to stand on the side of truth and justice. For over 4 decades, the people of Iran have been engaged in a struggle for their most basic human rights. They have faced persecution, imprisonment, torture, and death, all for daring to demand what should be guaranteed to all: the right to live in peace, to express their beliefs freely, and to choose their leaders without fear. From the student movement of 1999 and the regime's deadly attack on the Tehran University students' dormitory, to the protests of 2009, where millions took to the streets in the name of freedom, to the freedom fighters of November 2019, to the brave youth of today who risk everything by defying the regime's oppressive laws, These are the true architects of peace. The struggle is not for power or for conquest. It is for the simple yet profound right to live in dignity. Yet we stand at a dangerous juncture. The winds of war are blowing across our region. But let us be clear, this is not the war of the Iranian people. This is the war of a dictator, Ali Khamenei, who thrives on division and conflict. The Iranian people do not seek war. They seek peace, security, and a future free from tyranny. They are fighting for that future. Theirs is not just a quest to free Iran, but to free the Middle East, Arabs and Israelis from the terror of the Islamic Republic. It is because of them, my dear compatriots, that I have stayed in this fight. I seek nothing for myself, only to serve them. So as long as I live, I will continue my lifelong mission to free Iran from this oppressive regime. I will do everything in my power to ensure that the future of Iran is one of peace, democracy, and justice. We are on the cusp of change, and I remain committed to doing my duty to my country and my people. I will work tirelessly to oversee and ensure that Iran undergoes a peaceful and secure transition to a secular democracy, one where every citizen can be as an equal, free from any form of discrimination. In this mission, I draw inspiration from the great leaders of my youth, my own father, President Sadat, and President Nixon. These men understood that peace is not simply the absence of war, but the presence of justice, dignity, and freedom. They were architects of a better world, and it is their legacy that I seek to carry forward. President Nixon's vision for a peaceful and secure Middle East remains as relevant today as it was during his presidency. His boldness in pursuing peace, his willingness to challenge the status quo, and his unshakable belief in freedom continues to inspire me. As I accept this award, I do so with not hope, but belief that we are nearing the day when the Iranian people will once again take their rightful place in the world, a free, democratic, and peaceful Iran. This is the future we seek. This is the future we will achieve. Thank you again for this profound honor. I accept it in memory of all those Iranians who have lost their lives in the battle to reclaim Iran. As President Nixon's epitaph says, the greatest honor history can bestow is the title of peacemaker. Tonight, you have honored the memories of my fallen compatriots.
Thank you, sir, and that was very inspiring. It's now time to present the Architect of Peace Award, and I'd like to invite Your Highness, Princess Yasmin, to join us on stage, as well as a few special friends, Armis and Nikon, and Ling and Charlie Zhang, if you would join us as well. And I'm now going to read the award citation. The Architect of Peace Award was established in 1995, shortly after President Nixon's death, to honor individuals who embody his lifelong goal of shaping a more peaceful world. Its recipients include Presidents Gerald Ford, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, former Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, and Mike Pompeo, Senators Elizabeth Dole, Joe Lieberman, and John McCain, Ambassadors Walter and Leonore Annenberg, and Robert O'Brien, and we now add another distinguished name to that impressive roster. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has devoted more than 40 years to championing religious freedom in Iran, advocating for a democratic form of government backed by popular vote, and bringing attention to myriad ongoing human rights abuses in Iran. In a recent video message, now viewed by millions around the world, he said, quote, "The tyrant of Tehran couches his warmongering in Iranian nationalism, but he does not speak for our nation. There is a vast coalition of patriotic Iranians at home and abroad, ready to step in and serve our nation and make peace in our region. I will step forward at their call to oversee this peaceful transition to democracy and see Iran's return to the community of nations." Reza Pahlavi's devotion to his countrymen extends to those in his adopted country, the United States, as he serves as a representative of the Iranian people to Americans across our country. It is a pleasure and an honor to confer the Richard Nixon Foundation's Architect of Peace Award to Reza Pahlavi. Congratulations, sir. Award. Here we go.
Right now or after the pictures, right? Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our time together this evening, and I want to thank you all for your support. I hope that you leave tonight as inspired as I have been. Thank you for joining us this evening, and enjoy the special exhibition, The Ancient Worlds, which if you haven't seen, I strongly would encourage you to go see it. Thank you again, and good night.